All right, friends, today is a totally different kind of video, and I wanted to film it in a different way with my massive whiteboard in the background. I have never done a video like this in this manner, so if you can't really see what I'm writing, if this doesn't work out, just listen to what I'm saying, because this is one of the most important videos that I will ever create. And if you follow everything in this video, you can completely change your life. So please, I know it's just a YouTube video. I know you haven't invested much into this. You're just gonna watch it and you might never act on it. If there is any video to act on, it's this one right here. Because all the videos that have been talking about up until this point in time, especially around what is holding us back and how to live up to our fullest potential, all of those mean nothing if we don't actually do what we need to do to heal the internal blockages that will help us ultimately reach that success. So if you're interested in learning how to heal, we're gonna discover that today. If you guys don't know what you're even healing, this will also give you some insight into that. But I will also have another video linked down below that is my previous one, where you can see what are the major blockages that we typically have. So go ahead and check that one out if you haven't already, and come back to this one because this is where the work starts. Okay, step one, we need to heal our limiting beliefs. So how do we do that? First, we ask ourselves, what is triggering me? So we can discover our limiting beliefs through a couple of different manners. One is seeing our emotional reactions to things. So for example, you could have a really difficult situation come up in a relationship and you start to travel down the story behind the emotion that will help you discover what the limiting belief or the core wound is underlying the emotional reaction. So let me give you an example. So let's say that, okay, I guess I'll just use myself. Just be a little bit vulnerable here. My boyfriend was gonna move in with a girl, or a girl was gonna move in with him, amongst other people. And for me, that really brought up a lot of emotions because that's not something that I felt comfortable with. And so I kind of traveled all the way back down. I already knew this about myself, but I asked myself, well, why am I reacting this way? Why am I feeling a disproportionate emotional reaction to the stimulus, which is usually when you can start to see the trigger that comes from some kind of wound / limiting belief. So I traveled it all the way back down, asking why, what am I afraid of? And I eventually found that I am deeply afraid of betrayal. And this already goes back to my childhood and everything like that. But you can start to discover this for yourself. So you can find a limiting belief through these, essentially through these difficult emotions that you're experiencing that are disproportionate reactions to things. Or you can find a limiting belief by looking at your life and seeing what areas you're seeing more blockages arise. So like, for example, if you don't have a lot of money or you don't have a lot of friends, start to write down what your beliefs are about that specific area of life. So for example, if you don't have a lot of friends, maybe you believe that making friends is hard. So write that down. Write down what it is exactly that you believe so that you can begin to understand the core wound that essentially underpins that belief. So really what limiting beliefs are helping us get down to is more of the core wound. So the limiting beliefs develops as a result of the core wound. So if I have a fear of betrayal, I might have a limiting belief that, you know, relationships are unsafe, and then I might not be with somebody, for example. Or if I had a limiting belief that friendships are hard, it might actually come from the core wound of I'm not lovable, I'm scared to be rejected. So start to actually go through and write down your thought process behind emotionally triggering situations or areas in your life where you are experiencing blockages. And then once you get there, we need to get down to the root of the cause, which is a core wound around that limiting belief. So if you're noticing financial blockages, do you have an unworthiness wound? And you can type in onto Google like core wounds, and you'll start to see lists of things, and look at them and try to pair them up with what resonates. You can also use your birth chart for this. So for example, if you have a strong Saturn, like Saturn square moon, there can be a wound around I am a burden. I'm not allowed to have needs. So you can start to use astrology to discover what that core wound is underneath the limiting belief. So the limiting belief could be I'm never gonna find love. And underneath that is I am unlovable, I'm a burden, which is Saturn square moon, for example. And then you can start to dive deep, deep, deep into that and start to reprogram that limiting belief. So that is what healing step number 1 is. Understand your limiting belief. Understand your core wound, where this is arising from. The belief is really just cropping up as a manifestation, almost like protect you from that belief. From this core wound taking place in your life. So if I never go after relationships, for example, because I have a core wound that I'm unlovable or I'm a burden, then that belief will actually protect me from having to engage with that core wound. So step 1, find the belief, find the wound, and you can, again, use your astrology chart for this. The next step is to start to work through reprogramming your subconscious mind. So it's very important to understand what your subconscious mind actually is. Your subconscious mind likes to work in symbols. And that's actually why I feel like astrology is so powerful, because you see all these symbols in somebody's chart. You can connect with archetypes. And this is actually what I do in my coaching sessions. For example, somebody who has Saturn square the moon, we might need to connect with the archetype around the moon, which would be the inner child. Or we can connect with the archetype of Saturn, and we can start to visualize basically what symbols would, or images and things would represent those in our life, and we can kind of meditate and coach ourselves on them. But I'm not gonna get super into that because that's more so what I do with my clients. If you wanna make this practical and something that you can apply today, right now, you have to essentially find that core wound and create some type of way to speak to your subconscious mind through imagery, symbols. This is especially great when you enter into deeper brain waves. So this happens during hypnosis, yoga nidra, and meditation, but especially yoga nidra and hypnosis. These are going to enter you into reprogrammable brainwave states, which means that you are in a state almost of sleep or even sleep, where you can put on something that your brain and your subconscious will directly input, and it will start to change the way that it understands this belief system. So if you have a limiting belief and a core wound that you're not enough, or that you're unlovable, or that you're a burden, you would make a hypnosis or listen to a hypnosis that starts talking about how you are worthy, how you are loved, how it's safe to love, and it will start to reprogram those little t complex trauma experiences that we've had all throughout our childhood that told us that we weren't lovable or that we were a burden, which have retained in our subconscious mind, and which is why talk therapy isn't enough. We can't just talk our way out of having a subconscious wound, right? We have to actually address it at the subconscious level. The conscious mind talks, the subconscious mind processes imageries, symbols, metaphors, as well as archetypes, which is why, again, astrology is so, so powerful. So you can start to reprogram your subconscious mind through hypnosis and yoga nidra, which is what I do. Or if you want to, and this is really great because it starts to tap into the subconscious in a more like right brain, like the more masculine way. I don't know, I can't remember right and left brain, but one of the ways that you can do that is start to write down that core wound or that limiting belief, and write down all of the reasons why it's not true. So for example, if I say, again, I'm unlovable, I'm a burden, write down all of the ways in which you are not a burden and the ways that you help people in this world. So why you are important, why you are useful, why people love you, why it's important that people love you, how you are such a valuable asset and you deserve to be loved, all of the reasons why that's the case. I will also say, when you are doing some kind of hypnosis or any kind of subconscious reprogramming, it's very important that you never speak in a negative voice. So you can't say the words no. You can't say words that you don't want to exist. We are literally giving it on a silver platter, our subconscious mind, exactly what we want to create in our life. So you don't say, I don't want to be fat, or I don't want to be angry at myself. You write down, I am thin and healthy and strong. I am so happy with myself. Every day I feel so loved, so appreciated, and so adored. So you're going to write the prescription that is opposing this thing. So you are literally making a word prescription to go against this concept that your brain has held on to for so long, which again, you can see through your astrology chart. If you have a predominant Saturn, it's usually some limiting belief around receiving, around being able to relax, to enjoy life, to be good enough, things of that nature. And you can start to see kind of what those are based off of my last video if you want to get more into that. So essentially, another part that you want to ask yourself is, would I be saying this limiting belief or this horrible thing to my friend or to my child? No, you wouldn't talk to your friend or someone that you love like that. So that is the important part, is that not only are we going to proactively work on this by hypnosis or journaling all the reasons why it's not true, we are also going to reframe our belief in the moment. So if you start to feel that you're unworthy or you're a burden, in the moment you have to stop the train of thought and at least negate it or make it go away. And then preferably you would replace it with a positive thought. Sometimes that's too much of a stretch, but that's generally the goal. Okay, I don't even think you can see this, but we're gonna go with it. Okay, step 2. This comes from self-sabotage and conflicting needs. So this is going to occur when we have parts that are in contradiction to one another. So I already talked about this in the last video, and this is like where my work becomes so powerful with people, because obviously I know astrology and I can start to see in their lives and in their astrology chart where they have deep archetypal conflicts. And these archetypes are being skewed into like the lower vibrations, which I think I talked about in my second video, if you're how to live up to your highest potential. I talked about the lowest and the highest vibrations of each planet, so you can know which one you're living in. So definitely go check that out if you're interested in what I'm talking about here. So if you are living in a low archetype energy of a certain planet, it could also be in contrast to another planet, and they could both be kind of using each other, pitting against each other to sabotage you in some ways. But it's because they both have different, entirely different needs. So let's say, for example, you have Mars, which is the archetype of war and conflict. So this is going to be separation, the act of separation. And then let's say you have Mars opposite Venus, which is the planet of relationships or togetherness, harmony, the exact opposite as Mars. So an opposition is going to indicate that they are directly opposite each other in the chart. They innately will have completely different needs and desires because of their archetypes. And then on top of that, because they are in an aspect that is opposing each other, this is becoming doubly strengthened. So their needs, their differences, their desires not only are innately different in their archetypes, but the signs they're in, the houses they are in, are ultimately pulling you in two different directions. So let's say you have Mars in the 10th and Venus in the 4th. You have Mars in Capricorn, strong Mars, Venus in Cancer. This is going to be someone who has self-sabotage come up within their home relationships and with their work. This is going to be somebody who might not know how to integrate, how to be a masculine person out in the world. And this doesn't matter your gender, but I think you understand the yang energy, the self-actualization behind Mars. This is going to be that person out in the world who's just willing to go after what they want. And it's going to be in direct conflict with their home relationships. They're going to have this other part of them that just wants to curl up and read a book and be with their lover and just have an amazing, safe time at home. And then this other part of them that's really practical and wants to go out and make a plan and help the world. And this might seem like, oh, like that's not that big of a deal. But if you put this in direct opposition in people's charts, there can be these severe swings between one or the other. And there can be ways that they sabotage an entire area of their life because they haven't learned how to integrate these energies. This is a very like polar opposite example. Usually astrology is a huge mixture of the energies. So like Mars could be in Libra, which is Venus's sign. Venus could be in Aries, which is Mars's sign. And then that complicates everything a lot more, which is why astrologers are here. But this would be a very simple example of somebody who needs to learn how to integrate two parts of themselves. So what essentially I would do is I would meditate on the archetype of Mars in my chart, meditate on the archetype of Venus, ask these planets what they need, and then ask them how they can work together to create some type of harmony for what they want to have in their life, some type of solution or resolution. And so this is like this is my $1 million idea, basically. I'm just giving it to you for free. This is what I do with my clients. This is like life-changing stuff, I'm telling you right here. You understand how these archetypes function in your life, and you find solutions to get them to work together. If they are opposing each other and you never find solutions, they will swing to extremes. You will go in your career and abandon your family. You'll go to your family, you abandon your career. You'll feel like one comes at a loss of the other. And it becomes really, really challenging to understand what it is that you truly need. And usually when there is self-sabotaging happening, it's because there is a dysfunctional part that's trying to get its need met through ways that kind of sabotage the whole. So it's one part, for example, let's say your career is trying to get its need met for stability and security and creating something for the world, Mars in Capricorn, but it's sacrificing the entire whole, the health of the system, for that one part to succeed. So you can see how this becomes really problematic if we're not aware of how the different archetypes or facets of ourselves are working together or in conflict with one another. So understand the origin of the separation and also understand the strategy for how you can bring them back together. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So I talked about this in my last video, which is something I'm very, very passionate about, which is the wounded will. So the wounded will is going to typically be some type of issue around, it could be around the sun, but it could also be around Mars, or both. There's going to be some part of you that feels like when it was in the stage of separation or autonomy in our development as a child, it was not allowed to essentially fully embody that archetype. So maybe you were yelled at for being independent, you were criticized for how you were doing things as a child. So what that creates is an enormous amount of self-doubt, because you now feel like whenever I act on something, I'm gonna get reprimanded. Whenever I move towards something, I have a negative consequence. So animus, which is the thing that pushes us forward in life, starts to become something that we feel like has negative consequences. So just like all these studies show, when you ring the bell, the dog salivates because it got really used to eating food when the bell was rung. Our brain gets trained the same way around our ability to take action towards something. And so it's really sad how this can develop, and I've seen this with so many people, including myself. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because there are so many spiritual people who have a wounded will. And I really want to make some, I don't even think you can see that in the video. Regardless, wounded will. But anyway, so I'm getting distracted by myself. There's so many spiritual people who have this because we're so, nice and compassionate. And usually the thing that we need is this drive to separate and to create war, which is not very common in the spiritual land. So it anyway, I'll make a whole video about that. So our Mars, our will, is the thing that wants to protect us. It's the thing that animates us to take action. So it's our animus, it's our boundary, it's our no, our sacred no. Sacred no. So when you are afraid to utilize your sacred no, you become overly malleable by the world around you. So think about a little kid. They don't necessarily have the place to always say no to things. I mean, sometimes parents are good about that, sometimes they're not. But kids, at the end of the day, don't have full control over their lives. And so when you have a wounded will, in many ways, it's like you're still in that child phase where you are relying on the world around you to give you permission to be yourself, to also to tell you who you even are. And that's really around wounding of the sun especially. So if you have Sun conjunct Mars, square Mars, you can really, or even with Neptune, there's lots of different ways that this can manifest. You can start to have, you can start to look outside of you for people to reflect who you are. And this is also really going to be apparent for codependent relationships. So strong Neptune, Venus individuals or strong 7th house individuals. So if you have Sun, Moon in the 7th, there's going to be a way that you are defined by the people around you, and you allow them to do that because there was a wounding during the will phase where we were separated. So we have become reliant on those individuals. And it's fine to some degree, but it verges on unhealthy when we can't keep boundaries, when we don't know what we have to offer, when we're not confident, when we can't go after the things that we want in life because we are waiting for permission, or we're scared of judgment, we're scared to separate. We're scared to separate because we never did it as a child. So it's like now we have to separate as an adult, and it feels life-threatening. So on a very spiritual level, it's a kind of existential crisis moment or an ego death that can feel really, really scary. So in order to build up the will, we first have to activate our sacred no, our anger, and our protectiveness. The anger is the biggest part here. If you are not angry about something, it's because, and especially if it's somebody like crossing your boundaries, for example, like something that you think would cross a boundary, and you're not really angry ever, you have a will wound. And it's not, I shouldn't just say it so matter-of-factly, because sometimes people have Mars in like softer signs and they don't get as angry as easily. But if you never get angry, or if you're scared of anger, or if you repress and push down your anger and you're like, I hate being angry, which is how I used to be, then you have a will wound. And it's because anger is really, really useful. We need to have anger. Anger shows where we start and stop and where another person begins. It shows us where our boundaries and our container is to protect ourselves. It shows us also, it's the same passion for what we want to go after in life. So anger is that same energy manifestation of passion, vitality, sexuality, all of the animus. Anger can manifest in various outlets, or this energy can manifest in various outlets, one of them being anger. So if you have some kind of limitation around expressing your anger, this is where I would work on that with you as a client, for example. And I would really want you to work on embodiment exercises that allow you to reflect and push out that anger. And if you are so repressed that you don't even feel it, it's about really tapping into that even being there, tapping into the injustice, tapping into things being wrong, and actually like stoking the fire and letting yourself get a little bit pissed off about something. Because sometimes when people are so passive, when they're so defined and led by others in some ways, they just accept things. They roll over, right? Like a beta animal. And it's time to take our power back and become frustrated and exert that frustration. Say no, stand up for yourself. And so practicing small ways where we can hold boundaries, where we can disappoint people, and also work through the limiting beliefs that if I say no, I'll be rejected, or if I say no, this is gonna happen in terms of relationships, because usually will wounds occur because we have a strong Venus. Will wounds occur because we have a strong need to be liked, right? It's not just because of development, it's also because in development, relationships, connection with others were prioritized over separation. So there's going to be a desire to always go to the yes, yes mom, yes sir, instead of actually owning our own truth. And what happens as a result of having a will wound is that we don't actually know what our own truth is. We can be gaslit, we can gaslight ourselves. We can be confused easily. We cannot know our sense of direction, what we want to do next, because we've given that power to other people in our lives. Again, not our faults. It's happened during developmental years. But now that you know about it, it's your responsibility to change it. And so again, working on our anger, this could look like screaming, grunting, throwing a tantrum. When you're experiencing anger, you don't need to do this in public, or you can go to a bathroom, but having a second in the car, somewhere where you're completely alone, where you're not embarrassed to do this, where you can just let it out, put on an angry song, and like seriously let it out. And this is going to be one of the most powerful things that you can do, because once you start letting that out, it might feel scary at first, it might feel untamed at first, but eventually you can channel the anger, use it appropriately, use it at the right times and not at the wrong times, and you'll start to notice that you become much more online, much more alive, because in some ways when our will is wounded, we are sleeping in some ways in our life. We have the hands off the wheel and other people have the hands on our wheel. So you can see why I'm so passionate about this, because so many women, especially spiritual women and even men, doesn't really matter gender, but I see a lot of women have this wounded will, and because of that they are not living up to their desires or their potential because they don't even know what those are. And so we're gonna get really clear on this. If you ever work with me, we're gonna get really clear on what this is and how to work best through it in your chart. But I gave you some examples today of what to dive into if you feel like you have that. Okay, and then the final step that I'm going to talk about here today is spiritually being submissive. And this is where I feel like the whole Neptune aspect comes in. If you watch my previous video, living in idealization, living in fantasy, spiritual bypassing, that whole thing is very much spiritual submissiveness. And I don't know why I chose that, because it just felt like if there's any word I could use to describe Neptune, it's extremely passive. It really does not try to move towards things. So it kind of goes well with this will wound actually, because in many ways, those who have a strong will have a strong Venus and a strong Neptune. And these are going to be individuals who are very compassionate, who are very sensitive, who are very loving, and that can turn against them to become hypersensitive, to become deregulated emotionally, also to becoming so sensitive that they try to escape life and become passive. So they let go of the wheel because life is very overwhelming, which makes sense that so many spiritual people have this, because our life in this earth is so dense and so difficult. Neptune has a really hard time adjusting. If you have Neptune retrograde, typically you have a harder time adjusting to the atrocities of life than others do, for example. If you have Neptune making a square to a planet, if you have Neptune conjunct a planet, you are going to find that that planet is extremely spiritually sensitive. So you are very compassionate and understanding in that area of your life, but you become very overwhelmed by any negativity. And as a result, you can start to detach from your life in some way. This could look like putting too much energy into other people, becoming the savior, for example. This could look like doing drugs. This could look like watching a lot of TV, focusing in ways that we cannot feel the difficulty of life itself. And so what you truly need in this position is radical honesty. You have to have some radical honesty. And as I mentioned, you might need this from the outside, because Neptune has a tendency to create some personal deception where it will create an illusion of what the situation is. And so it can make us much more likely to kind of slither around the truth with ourselves. And we need somebody who has a strong Uranus or Pluto energy in our lives. Uranus or Pluto, which tend to be the planets of the most truth. Sometimes Mercury as well, but that one's so fickle we don't actually know for sure. So Uranus or Pluto is going to give us the truth in a situation in our lives. And so if you find that you have a strong Neptune and it's contacting a planet, you need to ask the people that you trust that have strong truth meters like Uranus and Pluto in their chart to tell you how you actually are in that area of your life, because you might need to face some sort of truth about how to navigate an area of your life that you have been avoiding. And it's only that way that you can actually face it and heal it. So you have to avoid the ways that you escape from your life. Find radical truth through those around you, or through a therapist, or through other types of therapies. What you really need also is to have strong embodiment practices, because Neptune will tend to, again, leave the body. It's literally where we see in trauma, people will detach from their body or detach from reality. This is very much that. So you will need to ground into the density of this vibration. And that could feel really scary to people with a strong Neptune who have maybe trauma in their past. So again, you'll want to work with people who are trained in this, who can help you through that process if you've never worked through some of those instances, because sometimes when we're floating and floating and floating in this high vibration, when we finally come back into our body, we can feel immense anxiety. We can feel fear or panic or discomfort because we are not used to being in this kind of dense energy. We're not used to facing the reality around us. So grounding into your body with help with those around you, having some kind of truth and honesty, and having consistent spiritual practices that don't allow you to bypass things, but allow you to actually hone your Neptune in a positive way. And so this could look like meditating, for example, and writing down, journaling after the truths and the insights that came through to you during that meditation, speaking to your angels, speaking to your guides, having different ways that you can connect with yourself and your internal world. Because sometimes Neptune also will use other people as an outlet for escape. And it's so, so important for this to not become a distraction, for you to use your spiritual experience to tune in with yourself and your needs, and to not use it as a form of escape. So these are the major things that I would work with people to heal. There's definitely more, but because it's going to depend on your chart. So if you want to work with me, for example, I do one-off coaching sessions, and I have coaching packages for just a handful of people. So if you are interested in something like that, I can go through your chart and work with you very specifically on defining these areas of influence, on defining these archetypes for you, and how to heal or work with them in the best possible way. But otherwise, I hope that this video gave you a lot of information, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're interested in working with me, you can hit me up at contact@willisboom.com, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.